Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk Astrology. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by our brilliant faculty member, Shu Yap. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. And how are you doing today?
I'm really good, really excited about our presentation today.
I'm very excited about this topic, and Shu is also going to be part of the faculty for the new medieval certificate here at Kepler College, which we're very excited about. So today, Shu, we're talking about where we can find our wealth and our fortune in our natal chart using medieval techniques. And you've put together a fantastic presentation, so let's dive in.
Great, thank you. Yes, today we're going to be looking at whether we can see wealth in a chart. And wealth is a broad term in this sense because it also includes things like, in general, our good fortune, because it's not always about the money. It's also like our status, how well we can get jobs, as well as how well we can maintain wealth. So that's what we're going to be covering today in a chart. But to start with, we've got an example chart here that I want to focus on, but I just wanted to put it back to you, Callum, and ask you, because I know you are a teacher in the fundamentals certificate, and what would someone from a Western fundamental astrology background look at in a chart like this to determine wealth and fortune?
Absolutely. I actually want to talk back to your first point that you made, because if we're looking at the broader picture when we're talking about wealth, we have to factor in how we're defining wealth, because there are certain socio-economic and geopolitical circumstances where that's going to supersede the individual's ability to attain wealth. So, for example, if you're an average citizen in, say, Yemen or the South Sudan, that's going to be a very different story to the likes of us in the United States, Australia, Japan, China. So I just wanted to put that out there to build on your point you were making at the beginning, because there are certain circumstances where it'll supersede if we're working with an individual level of how, fortunate they're going to be in their relative country and where they are around the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. And in some places, it's a privilege to even have ambition, versus other countries where, it's a given right that people do what they wish and what makes them happy. Yeah, people don't always have that privilege.
Absolutely. So I'm going to give you my non-cheating answer because, Shu, I've already seen this presentation, so I know some of the factors you put into this. So to give you my non-cheating answer, if I'm just skimming a natal chart and I'm running them through, first of all, if we're in our fundamentals, I'm usually going to look at the rule of the second house. So if we take this example right here, we've got Leo on the cusp of the second. So we're going to look at the ruler, which is the sun. Now, some of the factors I'm going to factor in is that in this house system, this sun is angular. So I'm going to think about this sun ruling the second house with some relative strength. I'm also going to be looking at that Jupiter in the second, and the fact that that Jupiter is disposited by the sun. So there is a connection there, and it's a little bit wide, but the two planets do see one another. The things I'll probably ding it for is the fact that the sun is not the sect light. We're going to have to look at the moon. So I'm going to factor that into my analysis as well. And also that Jupiter is out of sect. Now, we're talking about wealth. We're also talking about future fortune. I'm going to look at the part of fortune. We see that there in the eighth house. So we've got this financial access here, the second and the eighth. We have that Saturn ruling the part of fortune conjunct the insect Venus, and there are other conditions there. So that's going to be my very basic way of jumping into a chart and looking at the potential over a lifetime for wealth. But again, we also talked about the factors of the natal chart being the whole lifetime of a native. Some of the questions we have to ask ourselves is this individual born into wealth? Do they keep it or do they blow through all their money? Do they do well for themselves, but then blow it all away? Or do they keep all those finances? So there are so many variables when we're talking about finances, but that's my very basic way of looking and diving into a natal chart. My non-cheating answer.
Well, that's very good. I think that's a brilliant answer, and from that you can obtain a lot of information. And I wanted to go through a little example that I found in this brilliant book by Benjamin Dyke's translation, Sal's The Astrology of Sol B. Bisher, Volume 1. I know there's not a huge availability of English translations to us, but this is one that we can hold on to, and it's got some really brilliant astrology in there from the sort of 8th, 9th century medieval Persian times. So in there's a little section on fortune and wealth. And there is a little passage that in Sol's book that is actually an excerpt from Al-Andazaga, which goes through all of these factors that he looks at to determine someone's good fortune. And you can see how different the mind of a medieval astrology is. You know, they're starting with the fixed stars, and then they move on to the Triplicity Lords, and then a lot of fortune. So not even looking at any planets yet at this stage. Obviously, yes, if whatever the fixed stars fall on, but in general, they want to look at the fixed stars at the ascendant or the midheaven, and then they just go to the moon's condition and its association, because in a chart, it's like the moon is, in a way, the holder of everything. All the light of the planets has to sort of funnel through the light of the moon before it hits the Earth. It's the closest planet to us. Then angularity, not just angularity of any planet, but if they're a significator, one of the significators like the Triplicity Lords or the Ascendant or Ascendant Lord, then that is what really brings in a lot of power for wealth and fortune. And then the hemispheres of these significators, like when are they going to turn on? Are they going to turn on in the youth period or in old age? And then they look at Jupiter. If Jupiter makes any aspects to the luminaries, it would show you what kind of assistance and help that might be coming, as well as any receptions that are happening in the chart. And receptions was quite a big thing in the medieval times, and it brings a lot of power. So we'll go into that a little bit. And then the fullness of the moon. So basically, how much light was there given by the moon at the time of birth, because that indicates how much, at one level, how much wealth is coming into the life or going out of the life. And then lastly, the nodes. So you can see this list is quite different. And I found it really illuminating to see how the medieval astrologer's mind works. So let's go ahead and dissect this mystery chart, which you'll find out at the end who it is. So firstly, the fixed stars. Now, you know, for us modern Western astrologers, we tend to look at the fixed stars as a bit of an add-on. However, it was such an important aspect of medieval traditional astrology that, you know, you would start by looking at the fixed stars. And in the Sol book, he lists 30 major fixed stars that all have the complexion of planets, like a complexion of Venus or Venus-Jupiter. But he lists these 30 stars that are related to wealth. That's a lot of stars scattered all around the place. And he says that if you found one of them with the ascendant or the degree of the midheaven or with the sun and the moon, that will be more renowned for his nobility. So wealth was not just about the physical money and the resources. It was about how noble you were and who were you hanging out with? What was your status? Obviously, if it hits one of the planets, that's also good. But the more power it is when you hit the ascendant or midheaven. And so in this chart, you can see I've put in stars where the planets are close to fixed stars. We have right on the ascendant Canis Major or Procyon, which brings leadership, power, character, much intelligence, proficience in everything. Then Jupiter, it's a little bit wide, but it's very close to Regulus, especially at the time that this person was born, which was in 1955. And Regulus, most people know the fixed star Regulus. It's the heart of the lion. It brings leadership and power, significance. Sol describes this as taking many lands and cities and resembling a king, proficient in work, victorious, and not having to submit to everyone, having plenty, many assets, and the love of money. There's a whole heap of other meanings, but I guess, picked out the ones that kind of related to wealth. And also then we see Saturn. If we just looked at that Saturn, we would say, oh, it's pretty average. It's in a great house. It's next to Venus in a joy. So we would think, oh, Venus is definitely boosting Saturn, but Venus is also in a detriment. So we wouldn't think that Saturn was too crash hot, but it happens to be activated by this fixed star called Zubin Eshmali. And that's a very fortunate star. And it shows a friendliness to nobility, superiority, and leadership. So you can see all three stars have this kind of connection to leadership already. So it's not just about looking at each individual fixed star. You want to also look at the combination of the stars that are impacting and trying to integrate that. So we're getting a sense now that there is this star power kind of boosting this individual. And I know Saturn is just a planet, but and so is Jupiter, but Jupiter is the exaltation ruler of the ascendant, and there's a fixed star in the ascendant. So this is hitting the core of the personality, the core of this individual.
So I'm sure there are many people watching this, because I would do the same. I'd probably pause this video and I'd be quickly checking up the relationship of the fixed stars to my own chart. So just in terms of orbs, how tight are we with these fixed stars? Are we 1 or 2 degrees? How do you work with that when you're pulling up a chart?
Yeah, it's generally 1 degree, but in a natal chart, I always go to the animate feature and look at what's coming up because, as you know, with our predictive techniques, which we're also going to be covering a little bit of at the end, and in the certificate, the chart moves. It's not a static picture. So it's also, I think, really handy to look at what's coming in the life as well. So keep them very tight. 1.5 degrees maximum, but keep in mind that yes, they have this sort of like this. The stars have a more power than the planets. Like it's said that we can control planets to our degrees, like in terms of adjusting our behavior, doing astrological magic. We have that level of free will with planets, but we don't really have that with the fixed stars. We're just born and given their essences, be it good or be it bad. Okay, so then after the fixed stars, Triplicity Lords come in next. And Triplicity Lords have a huge significance in the medieval period. And this is something, although we're reviving it today, this is something that has been really lost in modern progressions of astrology. And the key point with Triplicity Lords is that it helps to sustain that power. So where stars is the power, it's kind of like the analogy of the sun. It's just this brilliant light. The Triplicity Lords is like the role of the moon. It helps to sustain that power, to keep it going, to keep it lasting. If someone doesn't have strong Triplicity Lords, and it's Triplicity Lords of the sect light that we're looking at initially, but if they don't have Triplicity Lords that are strong, but strong power, say in terms of a strong ascendant and whatnot, you may not be able to hold that wealth or power throughout your life. It may be just a come and go kind of situation. So they're very important. Sol describes this as the ability to judge a native, to see whether they'll be happy for the rest of their lives. So in this case, the Triplicity Lord of the sect light is the moon, and it's in Aries. So we have Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn are the Triplicity Lords. So we see Sun is angular. It's not in a great sign, but it is angular. We have Jupiter. It's in the second house, but the second house is not generally seen as a very good house. It doesn't have sight to the ascendant. So it is a stronger triplicity lord because it's in a fiery sign and it's of the same, triplicity, but it also has this power of the fixed star. And then there's Saturn, which is the mixed triplicity lord, which is also giving it some sustenance. So the two main ones here that we're looking at is Sun and Jupiter in terms of their dignity that they're giving as being able to sustain this power and wealth. So 2 out of 3 is pretty good. 3 out of 3 is amazing, but 2 out of 3, you'd be pretty happy with that.
This is supported by the fact that the Sun and Jupiter can see one another. I know, what are we, about 7 or 8 degrees separating. So again, what orbs are we using here in terms of seeing? Are we quite wide because we've got a light and the Jupiter, or what are we working with?
Yeah, well, the orbs, there's 2 ways of working with orbs. Like, in the text, you always see references to aspects by sign or aspects by degree. And there's different purposes for each one. But yes, in this sort of general wide lens approach of the life, you would definitely look at the fact that they are, Jupiter's receiving, Sun's receiving Jupiter, and they can see each other because throughout the lifetime, that Sun is going to progress to make that exact sextile with Jupiter. So yeah, it's worth keeping that into consideration. And then next we've got the Lot of Fortune. And the Lot of Fortune can be looked at as an alternative significator as well. Like, say if you do have very weak triplicity lords, you can say, okay, well, what can we look at next to try and give us some opportunities for wealth? Then you would then sort of look at the Lot of Fortune and its lord and what it's doing. So in this case, the Lot of Fortune is not in a great house. It's in the 8th house, so showing things like debts and losses. However, it's also showing things like partnerships and, entangling with other people's wealth. And the lord of that is Saturn. And Saturn is in a good house. And like we mentioned before, Venus is helping to boost Saturn. And more importantly, it's got this fixed star that's boosting Saturn. And the fixed stars kind of trump everything. If without that fixed star, I would kind of say, yeah, it's not too bad. It has sight. It can see the Lot of Fortune. That makes a difference. However, without that fixed star, it would be kind of a middling result. But however, with the fixed star boosting Saturn, we can say, look, there is a little bit of power that's boosting this Lot of Fortune.
Is there any thoughts on the nature of the aspect relationship, even if it's a square or opposition, or if it's a trine, sextile, etc.? How does that modify your interpretation?
I think any aspect is good at this stage. Okay. Yep. Okay. Then there's another lot that we look at, which is the lot of assets. And so this isn't in solar fire, I don't believe. However, if you want to calculate this without doing it in your head, you could go to astroseek.com and there is a lot calculator. And so the formula for this is the ascendant, and you're bringing the degree of the ascendant into the ecliptical degrees. So like 0 degrees is Aries, 30 degrees is the beginning of Taurus, 60 degrees is the beginning of Gemini, so on and so forth. So you add the degree of the ascendant with the degree of the 2nd house cusp, and then you minus the 2nd house lord. And what you get then, and you project that. That you just minus it. And then what you get is the lot of assets. And that's another factor that we look at. So you'll see on AstroSeek there'll be an input for you to add all these things in, and it'll spit it out for you. It'll even ask you what house system that you're using. It's brilliant.
So is this, I'm sorry, is this the primary lots you're using, so the lot of fortune and assets? Is there any other lots or parts you recommend taking a quick glance at, or do you just focus in on these two?
These are the two that were recommended in this
Okay.
process. However, in Ona Dosa's course on medieval significators, that's what this course is about. He covers significators for finances, for relationships, profession and career, and children. So these key topics that you get asked about it as an astrologer. So there are all these different ways to find significators, and then it's combining all these different lots to then find the almutant of those lots. It's really fascinating. I highly recommend that course. We ran that course in June, and we'll run it again next June, 2026.
Of course, as we know, children cost a fortune.
That's right. So here we have the lot of assets in the sign of Taurus. So this brings the rulership back to Venus, who is conjunct the ruler of the lot of fortune and the fixed star. So we can see there is a link with lot of fortune and lot of assets there through Venus and Saturn. So Venus and Saturn are very important significators here already that we see. We also look at the exaltation lord as well. Also, prior to that, the lot of fortune in Aquarius doesn't have an exaltation lord. But if there was an exaltation lord, that sign, we would look at that, because that is what's going to bring elevation and prominence for you to be able to gain assets or gain fortune. So if we look at the moon being the exalted ruler of Taurus, and look at the moon, it's highly elevated there on the midheaven, very popular amongst the community, and also the ruler of the ascendant lord. So you can see here how powerful this lot of assets is. It also shows that women, mothers, people that are ruled by the moon will be the ones that will help boost assets for this person. Now then, let's look at the condition of the moon and its associations. So by associations, it's who is the moon making aspects to, essentially. In terms of orbs here, I'm kind of just listing them all that I think that are really relevant. We want to see as well whether the moon is looking, especially at those significators, because those significators for wealth and the life, triplicities and things like that, is what's really relevant here. We're trying to really fine tune what we're looking at. So
in terms of orb, because we noticed that moon is quite far away, but with the moon being the fastest moving body, it's not going to take that longer time to meet up with that Jupiter. So is that a factor as well?
Absolutely, yeah. Yep. So you're right on the ball there, Callum. If it was Saturn, it was 20 degrees away, it's background noise. It's rather than a close association, it's a acquaintance, not even acquaintance, like maybe it's like a wider community support or something like that. But here we're going to see what the moon is actually touching. And you want to look for things like, are there any fortunes looking at her? So like, Jupiter being wide here is in that trine, it could be saying that, there's a lot of support coming to this moon, like in the form of like demand for a product or something like that. So this person might not know the individual people that want his product or want his service, but nevertheless, the economy is reflecting a fortunate sort of, like what you said, a fortunate, a benefic support for what this person's doing in their career. So fortunes looking at the moon. The moon's light, like, is it increasing in light? Is it waning in light? Look at the sun, looking at the sun from a square. So it indicates this was something that I had to think of. What does he mean by like whether there's a square to the sun? Like what does it matter? And I think it has something to do with the moon phase. If the moon is making that waxing square, that's the beginning of it coming really into full light. It's not full light yet, but it's the process of. And then the last square is like the moon starting to turn off. So those squares to the sun can be a really powerful indicator of like, is the moon actually in that hemisphere of the light, and is it coming out of the light or going into the light? And then we also want to avoid any afflictions from Saturn, because anything to do with Saturn in the topic of wealth and fortune is about scarcity. It's about lack mentality and limited thinking and that sort of stuff. So in this chart, we can see the moon is in pretty good shape. It is very prominent there, and the sex light and ruler of the ascendant. We can see that there is this Mars opposition happening here, and this can look a bit tricky because it's Mars in detriment and Mars is a malefic. But what makes this tone down a little bit is the fact that Mars is actually receiving the moon. So in a way, Mars is wanting to support the moon in its own sign there. And so it can kind of show that this person has to try really hard. Like, it's not like this person is just sitting back and the money is coming. That Mars is making it a bit of a struggle, making it difficult, but it wants to support that moon. And then, we have Jupiter, like you said there before, that is making this wide trine to the moon, which the moon is approaching. It's very bright, the moon. It's coming into a full moon very soon. Maybe just about a day or two after this person's birth, it would have been a full moon. And there's no aspect to Saturn. So all round, pretty good associations for the moon and conditions for the moon. Now, then, of the significators that we've spoken about, we want to know what's angular. So we can see that the sun and moon, two big indicators, are angular. So that's pretty strong. Not only are they the luminaries, so it's looking for the luminaries or the Triplicity Lords in the stakes, especially the ascendant and midheaven, that are going to be really powerful here. So immediately we see the luminaries there. So we tick that box. But not only are they luminaries, one of them is a sex light and the other one is a Triplicity Lord. So they're hitting the angularity status on both levels, power and sustenance. Jupiter, even though it's powerful, it's actually in the second house. And that's actually considered a bit of a debility because the second house doesn't have any light to the ascendant. But because it is a benefic planet, that any troubles that can bring can be overcome. Okay, so that's looking pretty good, having two of those luminaries there. Now we come to the hemisphere, and this is something I think, we do teach a sort of version of this in fundamentals, but to see it applied is actually really powerful. Planets that are above the horizon indicates the beginning of life, whereas planets below the horizon indicates the end of life or later life. So can you guess why that might be the case, Callum?
I'm thinking maybe, what would you say, primary motion. So as we're going through the sky, it's we're dawn, we're getting into the day. And then as we go around, in terms of primary motion, we're getting into our later life, would be my guess.
Absolutely. Great guess. And so the first quadrant, so from the 12th to the 10th, is like the young phase of life, probably as a young child. Then the next quadrant, the 9th to the 7th, is like the adolescence. Then adulthood is from the 6th to the 4th. and elderly is from the 3rd to the 1st. So where are these significators placed? So this can show you when this support or this power is coming. So you can see that this person has three of these quadrants ticked. And in fact, the moon is kind of straddling between two quadrants. So it shows that this powerful moon is going to be activated in his youth and coming into his teenage years. So we can see that this person had a lot of support and wealth possibly as a young child. And then coming into the adulthood phase, we've got the Saturn Sun significators there. So adulthood is looking pretty turned on in terms of wealth. And then this person's also going to go into his elderly phase with a lot of wealth. So pretty good all round, that's something to look for in your chart. Sometimes people's wealth come at a later stage. Sometimes they're born into a rich family, but then they're not rich themselves, into their adulthood. So sometimes people get an inheritance late in life and live out their life comfortably. So it's just interesting where these significators are actually placed around your natal chart. Okay, next point is the aspect to luminaries. We've talked about the moon before, but it's also the sun that we need to look at. So obviously, at a glance, we want to look at, is there any malefic or benefic planets looking at? And we want to sort of keep it quite, I guess, general at this stage. Like, for example, if there is an aspect to Saturn, which, the sun is in the same sign as Saturn. It will be coming into Saturn. It could be one thing is scarcity, but also, having to labor, having to have sorrows, as part of this journey to wealth and power, like those kinds of more negative Saturnian keywords can be connected in the pursuit of wealth. Any Jupiter aspect is good. Jupiter will want to bring out the conditions, the character, the professions, the nature of the luminary that it is connecting with. So for Moon, perhaps it making a wide sort of, sight to the Moon by trine, it's going to bring out themes of, say, the physical body or health being important, maybe females, mothers, the community, popularity. It's bringing the benefit of that sect light and to prominence. So that's aspects luminaries, pretty straightforward. Then we have the receptions especially to the lot of fortune. Basically, can the lot of fortune see its lord, and who is its lord? Because wherever the lord of the lot of fortune is, that's the person, that's the nature, that's the profession, that's the environment that's going to boost you and bring you to your fortune, essentially. And Ehsan has done a fantastic webinar just this week on the lot of fortune, and he talks a little bit about this too. So not only do we want to see the who is bringing the fortune by looking at the domicile lord of the lot of fortune, we're also wanting to look at the exaltation lord of the lot of fortune. So in this case, the lot of fortune doesn't have an exaltation lord, so we're down to just looking at Saturn. And the Saturn here, as we mentioned before, has that fixed star power behind it and the association with Venus and being in a very fortunate house. So overall, we can see that, and it has a direct site, quite a close aspect to the lot of fortune there. So we can see that there is actually going to be this Saturnian nature that's going to bring about this fortune. Maybe, yes, definitely a lot of hard work, maybe older people, people that can bring fortune are also the commoners, Saturn also rules like the common, the workers, the minorities, but also in terms of Saturn, there's like things like big companies, corporations, those bureaucratic kind of situations are also very Saturnian. So think of all those things. Yep.
Do modalities factor into analysis? Because I'm noticing here we've got quite a lot of fixivity here. So is that something that's in the back of your mind as well, or?
He doesn't mention it in this set of instructions. However, in medieval astrology, fixity is actually a strength. Having fixed planets is considered to be a strength especially over mutable planets and then cardinal, because it gives you that sustenance, it gives you the longevity. So that is one point of strength that is considered there. So it's kind of a given thing that we should know that as a medieval astrologer. So that's a really great pickup. So we can see there that lot of fortune, even though it is in this sort of more tricky house, there's a lot of support there to want to try and pull it out and elevate it. Next, we're looking at the fullness of the moon, and this is a simple thing: is the moon, waning or waxing? Because that does make a difference. And you can see in this chart, this moon is coming into fullness. It's like that feeling of being born into a harvest. Just the abundance around you, is indicated by this full moon here, approaching full moon. So that in itself is a great omen. And then nodes, are there anything with the nodes? Especially you're wanting to look at malefics with the nodes. If there are malefics with the nodes, it can make it really difficult for wealth. Here we see nothing there connected to the nodes at all. So all up, are you ready to see this chart being revealed? Or do you have any?
But what I love about this, and when you sent the presentation over, just the whole approach, just how comprehensive it is, and this holistic look at the chart. So it's not just pulling it up. What's the rule of the second house? Da 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 da. How comprehensive this? We've got 10 points of considerations, and then we're building a picture as we go through. So this is mind-blowing to me, just how methodical and just how much is involved in this analysis.
Yeah. Well, actually, just on your point, I know people sometimes criticize like texts like Abu Mashar for trying to include everything. But actually, that was a done thing in the medieval times. And it's important to understand that nothing really cancels everything out, because even though there could be 15 factors that we're looking at, they are all representative of us in some level. And human beings are a very complex creature. And it represents so many little facets, like all those connections that we saw, for example, to the moon or to the luminaries, or even to the lot of fortune. It's not actually just saying good or bad. It's actually saying, who are the types of people? What are the types of situation that's going to bring that part of the chart alive? So we have to stop thinking in this sort of real linear or dual perspective. It's about integrating a whole heap of factors to build this picture of the human life, just as how an artist will do layers and layers of brush strokes to paint the full depth of a character and the face. So this is essentially what we're doing, but with planets and fixed stars and aspects and all of those wonderful things that we do. Here is our chart owner. It's Bill Gates. And you can see, obviously, we all know who he is. He is the owner of Microsoft. He is, sorry, I meant the wrong slide. I should have had this one first. Right off the bat, 3 fixed stars on very significant points. Bill Gates rose to leadership very early on in his career. He started Microsoft in 1975. I mean, not like computers were only just at its infancy at that stage. 20 years later, he was the richest man in the world. He was the youngest billionaire. He's very intelligent on top of that. So he has, it's said that he started programming when he was only 13 years. So he was born in 1955. So starting programming back in those days, I mean, he must have been a massive nerd. Like, he's like the beginning of nerds, right? And Microsoft became one of the world's most widely used operation systems. So this is what I was saying about, for example, Saturn being that lord of the part of fortune. It's the common people, like the poorest people have Microsoft, like right through to the big corporations, the big government systems. So it really hits the like everyone, and that also is shown by that sect like the moon, right at the top of the chart. It's the popularity, it's the ubiquitousness of his product or service. It's just a common. It's hitting the common denomination essentially. So with these fixed stars on these PowerPoints from the get-go, Bill Gates was really blessed with essentially like star power, literally. And he had great triplicity lords as well. 2 out of 3, as we said, were strong. Jupiter is the ascendant lord by exaltation and very close to conjunct Regulus in the very powerful house of wealth as well. The sun, even though it's quite weak, it is angular, and it has a lot of rulership by Mars there in terms of its domicile, triplicity, and terms. So a lot of drive and ambition behind that to sustain his power. And then mix triplicity with Saturn, again with a fixed star, and with Venus. So he was not only born into a good upbringing, both parents are very wealthy and respected professionals. I think his dad was a lawyer and his mum was a businesswoman. He was born into elite education, private education, lots of extracurricular activities that were very children of his age wouldn't have had. His parents really pushed him and encouraged him into leadership, and they had good business networks. So this is how a triplicity is working. It's showing you how you use that power, how you apply it, and how you keep it and build on it. So he had both going for him, the power and the sustenance. And then we talked about the lot of fortune, also his own personal support system, as in Saturn, being the triplicity lord, is contributing greatly to his external projects, the things that are going to make him fortune, that's going to lead him to his fortune. And then the lot of assets, we can see that it's ruled by Venus and the moon. A lot of assets, remember, was in Taurus. So I was thinking with these 2 feminine planets, women must be very important as part of his wealth and fortune. And his mother and his wife are very prominent in terms of helping him to, I guess, pull him out of this sort of nerdy, technical personality to actually being marketable. His mother had a great network of business professionals. And his wife has been very strategic, especially in the philanthropic areas of his work. So building it beyond just the technical aspect. He's good at the technical stuff, but his wife was more of the human stuff. And you can see that by the elevation of that moon ruling the lot of assets. So
this really shows in this comprehensive method, we're going through the whole life story of Bill Gates. You've talked about the support from the early age, in a sense, having a head start, but he took that head start and ran 1,000 miles with it, with support of the females in his life and the roles they played. And of course, you talked about the ubiquitous nature of Microsoft. We've all got computers, everything around the world. We've got so much going in, but we're expanding here through the whole lifetime, and maybe some of that fixivity as well. He didn't, attain wealth and then blow it. He had that ability to fix, to maintain his wealth and to build on that with the support of everyone else. So it's really a fascinating chart example in this.
Absolutely. And I think that the Moon-Mars opposition there, even though on first look it could look a bit, gnarly, like that's not a great aspect to have. But the fact that Mars is receiving the Moon, it's making the Moon, it's making the Mars aspect just more manageable, maybe showing up in terms of drive and effort and motivation, as opposed to just very, lazy or demotivated, which is what we can kind of sometimes see when Mars is in Libra. And then there's also a bit of luck involved, like lucky stars, but the Moon coming into its fullness, like being born into a life that was blossoming, being born into a harvest. It's also luck. The moon's condition there is really just reinforcing just the power and prominence and the support that Bill already has. So then if we go on to the next lot of conditions, angularity. So the fact that the luminaries were angular, but not only were they luminaries, they were also Triplicity Lords and the sect light. That, I think, shows how prominent and how seen and how much of a public figure this person was. It's all good to be, we all know lots of, say, very technical, nerdy types that sit in their dark rooms and are on computers all night, but they're not necessarily going to be seen and by the big world. But for Bill Gates, he was probably that person, but having those luminaries angular is making him able to be seen for what he does, being acknowledged. And then this is the interesting thing with the hemisphere. So, like I mentioned, with these significators being scattered around the chart, it looks like he will have support and prominence kind of throughout his life, and coming into his elderly life, it looks like he'll be heading into there with a very powerful exaltation lord and a triplicity lord. So there is no end to his wealth there. And the luminaries are supported by benefics. Mars is that potential issue. However, like we said, the reception there is really easing the pressure off that Mars and making it work more productively, as well as Mars belonging to the sect that he was born into. And then we've spoken about the lot of fortune already, being Saturn and how that's linking into the commoners. The lot of fortune is also in the 8th house, and he's had partnerships throughout the whole journey. And so maybe those partnerships could have been difficult. I don't know the ins and outs of it all, but I think all partnerships are. But in a way, his fortune is tied to collaborations. And yet, fullness of moon, he's blooming and no aspects to the nodes. So we can see here how, Bill Gates has had a lot of luck, but had a lot of prominence through power and an ability to sustain it. And it was just his karma. It was just his fate to be able to go through and constellate this kind of chart. But I thought I would also compare this to another couple of quick examples here. An example of someone that didn't have much money in their life. And this is Emily Dickinson. So Emily Dickinson, wrote all of her life, but she wasn't really known, or she never really made any money from her writings, believe it or not, until after she passed. And so I thought it'd be interesting to look at her chart to compare. And so here we're just going to quickly run through. There's no fixed stars, none of these 30 wealth stars that are connected to the ascendant or midheaven or the luminaries or any planet for that matter. Nothing close in orb anyway. The triplicity lords of her sect light, though, however, were Mercury, which is in detriment and in aversion to the ascendant. there. We have Saturn, is very prominent, but there's no dignity, but that's a very powerful spot. Whatever's culminating at the midheaven there is a very strong indicator of what the themes of life is. And I mean, look at her. Doesn't she just look like Saturn personified? I know it's a long time ago. No color photography back in the day, but you know, that's definitely Saturn.
Going back to your point before, did we not say the malefics close to the node is an issue as well?
Exactly. Yes,
Right.
that's one of the points. Yes. We'll go through that in the next slide. And then we have Jupiter. It's fallen and it's cadent. So here we don't have very strong triplicity lords at all. What else have we got? A lot of fortune. Because we don't have strong triplicity lords, we can look at the lot of fortune as an alternative significator. So let's see what we can see there. The lot of fortune is next to Jupiter, which, you know, that's quite a good thing to have. Jupiter helps with the fortune. It is a fallen Jupiter, so that takes away some points there. And it is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is a planet of scarcity and lack, but nevertheless, it is kind of in this sort of, you know, helpful sign, because the signs are trine to each other. So it shows that there is some kind of support coming. How she actually survived was actually through the wealth of her father. Her father was very prominent. In fact, she was actually born into a rich family. She just didn't have any of her own money. Her father was a prominent lawyer, politician, amongst other things. And he made sure that she had access to a good education, which was actually quite rare in those days, that women were able to go to school and receive that kind of education, which led to her ability to write and to think. And she definitely did use those skills. So you can see that Saturn is feeding that lot of fortune there. So even though she didn't have much of her own wealth, she had the goodwill of her father to be able to bring that through to her. And
so
it
goes, oh, I'm sorry. It goes back to the point before about the socio-economic realities. So a female born in 1830, again, you're going to be in a place where you can't vote, you don't have property. It is through the patriarchal lineage, you know, not only a prominent father, I think a grandfather was the founder of a college as well. So this support has to, in that day and age, the realities of women living those days has to come from the male figures in their life. And of course, we're talking about this prominent Saturn. And yeah.
Totally. That Saturn is probably her biggest asset in a chart. It's feeding lots of things, including the lot of fortune. Then if we look at the lot of assets, it's not in here, but it will be at 18 degrees Libra, so close to her moon. So the ruler of Libra is Venus, and you can see Venus is combust. So that tells you not much there going in the way of assets, but the exaltation of Libra is again Saturn. So we're coming back to Saturn there as what's feeding the lot of assets. So you can see there that the importance of her father feeding her, and her, not just her material security, but actually her skill to be able to try and bring about material security. And the moon's condition, it's largely isolated. We only see separating squares from Jupiter to Venus and Mars. So two benefics and a malefic, but they are separating. So not too strong. And it's deeply waning. You can see the moon it's past the 3/4 mark. It will be soon heading into the balsamic phase. So compared to Bill Gates' chart, you know, being born into the harvest, this is being born into the decay part of the moon cycle. Makes a difference, okay? And then let's look at how angular her significators are. Again, we only see Saturn. is angular there out of all of the significators that we've spoken about. And then in terms of the hemisphere, now we see Moon and Saturn are the two significators, the sect light and the Triplicity Lord and the Lord of the part of fortune are in the early quadrant. So in youth, she was born into a wealthy family, being given a good education for a woman, etc. The other two significators, Mercury and Jupiter, are in the elderly phase. Now, she died at 55. So in today's terms, that 55 would fall into the quadrant between the fourth and the sixth houses. So it's almost like she never got to see her wealth, but posthumously, that's when she became known. So that's also another great little technique to look at. Also feeds onto the Saturnian theme of delays and longevity and things coming very slowly. Aspect to luminaries, we see probably the most beneficial point for Emily is that her sun and the moon are aspecting benefics. So sun has a Venus next to it, the moon has a Jupiter square, even though it's separating, but it's still quite close. So it shows that, there was talent. Like if the light and the luminaries is about how you shine, she definitely had that there. And it's just that she wasn't able to sustain that on her own. It was actually through her father's material wealth. And then who is receiving a lot of fortune? Here we have Saturn. Saturn, we've spoken about a lot, indicating that the father will bring about the fortune. We also have Mars, who is the exaltation of Capricorn, where the lot of fortune resides. And that indicates that some of the help that might be coming for her fortune are Mars-like people and situations, males, males that are independent, assertive, and directed. Now, from my research of her, she didn't associate with a lot of people. She was a hermit. She never left the home, but she had a few close consorts that she wrote to and corresponded with, and they were essentially male figures. I think one was an editor and another one was, I can't quite remember, but they were like prominent, the three prominent people that she had interacted with outside of the household were three males. And then just looking at the fact that Mars and Saturn as a combination ruling the lot of fortune, these are the two planets connected to hard work, labor, struggle and toil. Well, what she did all day was that she stayed at home and she worked the land. She was essentially farming the land, growing all of her vegetables. Now, that's very Saturnian. That's very Mars. And even though it's not a monetary thing, that's how she supported her household, by growing food and working the land. So it shows there that those two lords of the lot of fortune is bringing the situations, the people, and the nature to the way that she brings fortune. But otherwise, yeah.
So you're talking again about this, looking at the chart in a holistic sense. It's like, what effort, what drive are you going to put into your life to gain the fruits of your labor? And of course, we've got a dignified Mars as a chart ruler. We're below the horizon, so we can imagine it's a lot of work behind the, well, not behind the scenes, but in the private life and not so much out in the public arena. So all these factors in this holistic sense of weighing up, for Emily Dickinson, what energy, how hard is she pushing? And she obviously worked very hard to achieve what she did throughout her life.
Yes, she didn't have a big external world. She didn't really have many friends, but her internal world was very rich, and we saw that through her writing. So yeah, that's indicative of those planets in that lower hemisphere of the chart. And then lastly, like you said, that North Node next to Saturn, it kind of just puts the icing on the cake. It just confirms the terms of her wealth, like, characterized by Saturnian themes like hardship, struggle, labor, austerity. Like she was very frugal. She never bought much, and a very traditional household. And in traditional households, women stayed home and they worked. That was their domain. She never married or dated. She's very traditional. And this also reinforces the importance of the father in her whole ability to gain power, but also to sustain herself. It was all through her father, strict yet distant, but very materially supportive of her life and of her intellectual skills. So there's Emily Dickinson. And then I wanted to show an example of someone that had a lot of money and then lost a lot of money, because I thought that would be a nice sort of in between. And so remember this guy? we all knew him in the 90s. So MC Hammer, he was a rapper back in the 90s, was quite big. He really was a bit of a one-hit wonder kind of guy, I guess, like not just in his music, but in his finances too. Fixed star. So we see that there is an ascendant conjunction to the fixed star Pollux, which is a fixed star of wealth, power, courage, and ingenuity. And the moon is also conjunct Altair, which is a star of significance, described to have a far-reaching voice, which I thought was interesting, and one resembling a king and having plenty and many assets. And so straight off the bat, we see fixed star activity compared to Emily Dickinson, who had no fixed stars. So what this is saying is that fixed stars actually do really matter when it comes to power, and not necessarily wealth, but often money is power, isn't it? So there's just that sort of connection there. So, MC Hammer was, I think at his peak, had like $30 million or something, and he lived this fully extravagant lifestyle with like 250 staff and just completely pimping it, as you would as a guy in his early 20s with $30 million. Like, of course you would just live it up. But he also lost it all and became bankrupt not long after. So Triplicity Lords of the Sun. Now we see they're very strong. So the primary Triplicity Lord is, they're not, primary Lord, Triplicity Lords of the Sun. So the Sun is very strong, is exalted and culminating. Then next we have Jupiter, who is in rulership, though in the 8th. Then we have Saturn, the mixed Triplicity Lord, who is also in rulership and angular. Or I would say that's probably not angular. I would move that Saturn into the 8th house. So two of the triply with the rule, around the 3-degree rule, we move it to the next sign. So pretty strong Triplicity Lords. And so let's go on to Fortune to cross-check on the wealth status. We have the Lot of Fortune here in Taurus, ruled by Venus and exalted by the Moon here. Venus is in detriment and Moon is peregrine. Why have I got Mercury? Why have I got... Sorry, I've got a mistake in my notes. So yeah, Venus and Moon, not great conditions there, ruling the Lot of Fortune. A lot of assets is actually somewhere in the 5th house here, 23 degrees Scorpio. It's ruled by Mars, who, although it's in its sign of triplicity, it's in the bound of a debilitated Mercury, and there's no exaltation in Scorpio. So it's also cadent. So it's middling, I would say, middling to to little support there for the lot of assets. Moon's condition, it's also waning, similar to Emily Dickinson. It's very dark. It shows weakness. And the important thing to see here that the moon is about to move into a harmful conjunction with a very powerful Saturn. So there brings that scarcity and loss kind of factor coming into the life. And then let's look at how angular these significators are. Both luminaries, including the ascendant lord, are angular here. Sun is also the first triplicity lord there. So there's a double whammy there. So that kind of shows prominence and popularity and being seen, the angularity aspect there. Saturn and Jupiter, the two other triplicity lords, are in the 8th, which is actually a debility, especially in terms for wealth. Saul describes it as if it's in the 8th and it's a benefic, that one can overcome their losses. But if it's a malefic that's in the 8th, you might not come back from the losses. But so we have mixed results here because we've got a malefic and a benefic there, both on equal par, both in their rulership. So we can say it's a bit of a mix. The hemisphere of his significators, most of his significators are in this kind of youth quadrant here. So shows indicating his prime in his youth stage, which is around the 20s, which is exactly when he had his boom and bust eventually. One thing that's really impressive about this whole study is the hemisphere thing. That's something that's been so simple, but you have to know the significators. Yeah, and this is where also Ona's course is really fantastic. It's actually finding what it is and how and when it's being turned on. And so we see it show brilliantly here in MC Hammer's chart.
I'm so fascinated by talking about the hemispheres and when in life things might be coming. So as you said, we've got youth highlighted here and nothing going on as we get older. So that's why I love doing these podcasts, because I learn something new every time. So this is absolutely blowing my mind. I love it.
Great. Yeah. And then aspects to the luminaries, we spoke about the moon here approaching Saturn. Saturn is the mixed triplicity lord, so it is somewhat helpful. But moon and Saturn are not a good combination. They're very contrary to each other. They're not friends. So this is just not a good omen for what's to come. I mean, a very waning moon heading into Saturn is not a good sign. So who is the Lord of the Lot of Fortune is Venus. Venus can't see the Lot of Fortune. It's in detriment as well. So it's not very helpful. The moon, although it can see it by square, it's providing some level of prominence. So maybe this is bringing the popularity, because his You Can't Touch This track was like #1 for months, or no one can really get over that dance. And the moon is also indicative of music and dance and movement, that fluidity of the body. And so that's what he was known for. Like the way he was dancing was like very water-like, right? And so moon is also, don't forget, moon is conjunct with Altair, that fixed star that's very beneficial. So even though it's isolated and it's waning, that fixed star gave it prominence, didn't it? It gave it power. It definitely gave it a bit of a boost. If it wasn't next to a fixed star, we probably wouldn't have seen him become famous, for example.
And it goes back to your point before. If we contrast him with Emily Dickinson, who was very much maybe more introverted, wanted to be out of the limelight. Here we've got the preponderance of the planets above the horizon. We've got this exalted sun conjunct the midheaven. This guy was going to be visible, but we're talking about here, how long is this going to last for, and how long is this wealth and fame? Does it have the, what would you call it? The, I've lost the word. You know what I mean? Yeah, the longevity, I guess, to a certain degree.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. I mean, just look at their pictures. I mean, we've got this with the sun culminating and Emily Dickinson with the Saturn culminating. I mean, that the picture says it all, doesn't it? An exalted sun as well. So, a lot of ego in there too. And he was a young man in his 20s with all this money and lots of good skill, and so he had his moment there, and good on him.
And some of the modalities you've talked about before. So we've got a lot of mutability going on here, a lot of
Mhm.
cardinal. We've got some fixivity, but we're leaning towards that mutability, I think, here.
Absolutely. So you can see how things are chopping and changing. Mutability shows change. And that's why, he rose to fame quickly. And then a few years later, he filed for bankruptcy. How do you lose $30 million? Like, I don't think I could if I tried. And then lastly, as we saw in Emily Dickinson's chart, we also have Saturn here with the South Node. And that's quite difficult. Like, Saturn with the South Node is probably more challenging than Saturn with the North Node, I would say, in terms of wealth. So, and then I just thought I'd quickly throw in here. Oh, yeah, I've got all my slides back to front. Okay. So Firdaria is a technique that I'm also going to be teaching in a course next year as part of the medieval certificate. It's an ancient Persian Time Lord system, which divides the life into 75 portions of one or two planets. And it's a really fascinating way to look at the trends activated in a person's life. And as you'll see, it's actually very simple but sophisticated in its application. So we can see during his peak earnings, this was during the time of his Mercury Sun period. And so you'll see that the second planet becomes really prominent. And without wanting to sort of explain the technique too much, because we don't have too much time, but we're looking at the sun here. The sun is exalted. It's one of his strongest planets. It's culminating, and this is where we saw his finances and his life peak. It's a sextile. It's the first Triplicity Lord. It's exalted, conjunct the midheaven. It's also it's the exalted Lord of the 10th and the domicile Lord of the 7th. So when the planet becomes activated in the Firdaria, it wants to bring through everything it represents in the chart. It's like it's their turn for activation, and they only get activated in this pattern once in a 75-year cycle. So it's very prominent to see how they can come alive. Whereas if we contrast that with when he filed for bankruptcy, we can see here it was Moon Jupiter. And you think, oh, Moon Jupiter, but Jupiter's one of his Triplicity Lords, and it's in its own sign. But it is in the 8th house, right? And it's the second Triplicity Lord in the 8th house of debt. It's also the exalted Lord of the 1st house and the domicile Lord of the 9th house. So whatever's in the 8th house is really not supportive to the individual. And I wanted to show actually a combination of the perfected chart with the transits at the time to illustrate, how much more fine-tuned detail we had, but I forgot to bring that up. But what I can just say is that by transit at this time, Jupiter had gone into fall. So Jupiter was going through his 6th house, had just entered Capricorn. So just like annual perfections, when you're looking at a Firdaria Lord, you're wanting to look at the transits to see what happens. And so whatever transits of Jupiter that's happening is going to flavor the type of significations it will bring. So even though this is a dignified Jupiter, but by transit being coming into fall, it's going to bring out more of those 8th housey kind of feels of that Jupiter. It's going to bring out the fallen nature of Jupiter, which is there. And the reason for his bankruptcy was his extravagance in spending. Like he had all of these like luxury cars, 250 staff, like a mansion in San Francisco, which I
Like literally
believe is
Jupiterian, just overdoing it, overextending himself, and then hitting the bottom.
absolutely, absolutely. And so this was his downfall. And the other thing to note about Jupiter, about this period of time, is that if you look back on this Firdaria chart, he had finished this whole Mercury youth phase and coming into this moon phase. And so he's coming into the major Firdaria Lord of the luminary out of sect. And that can be a real shock for sometimes for people. Like, so day chart people, when they get into their 30s from 32, it can be a bit of a shock for them to come into this period of instead of shining, they're now really having to step into this humble, supportive kind of role of that's signified by the moon archetypically. So
Why? I'm just curious in terms of looking at this and that period from 1980 to 1991, because I'm looking at the Mercury rule time, and of course, if we look at Mercury, it's not in the best of shape. So
mhm.
how would you look at that in terms of, because that was quite successful. I know you've got the
Yep.
second significators, but I'm curious because of that condition of that Mercury.
Yeah, well, it shows that it's not really sustainable. Whatever that, what the vibration of this time is going to be very mutable. It's going to be debilitated. So,
Mm.
and as we know, the mutable modality is about change. So this sort of up and down, the ebb and flow, it is the most debilitated modality to have. And it can also show other things like, in the chart, in terms of its rulership and things like that. I mean, for example, Mercury is ruling the third house. I know it's kind of hard to see there. Is exalted and rulership of the third house. He became very well known for his rapping. He's an MC, like it's like just the words, like noise almost, like continually flowing out of him. Is one way to look at that Mercury too. So we're looking at it in terms of the context of wealth. And so for wealth, we can see the wealth there being obtained is not standing on very strong foundations. It's the foundation is Mercury, which is cadent and debilitated.
Ah,
Yeah. So we'll go through this kind of stuff when we do our Firdaria course. And I love Firdaria because it's a great way to scan the life and look at the big picture lens. And you can also drill right down because Ferdarias can break right down as well. But, it's these micro details. Maybe we could do another webinar of these same cases and then looking at the Firdaria overlaid with the annual perfections to see what really activated, how we can fine tune a natal chart analysis by looking at the predictive stuff. So, yeah, so that's,
absolutely. I would love to see that. Fantastic.
yeah. And so here I thought I would go through just traffic light system, of all these three cases, green being good, red being not good, and the orange being middling. We can see here of all of these conditions that, all the greens in Bill Gates' charts. I went through each condition, go, oh, yeah, is this good? Is this middling? Or is this bad? It's very similar for Emily Dickinson and MC Hammer. You can see that there's two greens. There's only just an extra orange versus like one less orange between MC Hammer and Emily Dickinson. So we can see here that her positive attributes to wealth were things to do with her luminaries and the reception to the lot of fortune. It kind of just shows this sort of inner light that she had, and it definitely was kept inner because she wasn't well known until after she died. But anything that's kind of more based on kind of the luck of the chart, and her sustenance was pretty good, I guess, or even though it doesn't, yeah, that's the one thing, it didn't really show through with the Triplicity Lords, but in terms of her own ability to maintain her wealth, she never really did that. It was all, as you remember, coming back to that Saturn, that father figure that sustained it for her. So it wasn't actually her that sustained it. Whereas with MC Hammer, we can see that there is potential there. You know, the fixed stars says it all to a degree. Triplicity Lords also say it pretty well. But, you know, the rest of the conditions were quite poor. The only thing I haven't sort of highlighted here is a hemisphere, because that's more not good or bad. That's just kind of like, you know, a time thing. However, with MC Hammer, like, he's continued, even though he filed for bankruptcy, like, he's continued to just then, I'm assuming, lead a normal life. And I don't know what he's doing now. He's probably got some kind of job somewhere. But, you know, he is, you know, I'm assuming he doesn't have someone feeding him money and sustaining him, that he's just still kind of overcoming, you know, just supporting himself, you know, to a degree.
Yeah, I do believe, doing a little bit of research, I believe, of course, he's not got to the same height as he has, but I've looked it up. Apparently, his net worth now is $2 million, which is nothing
Oh,
to shrug off. But you know, whether he's doing podcasting, I think he's doing, you know, things on the side. So he is sustaining himself at that point. So maybe that
yeah,
speaks to that. But of
yes.
course, not at the heights he was at back in the day.
No, exactly. And that's, I think, Triplicity Lords in action there. Like, just keeping it going. He's had his peak, you know, his peak was in his youth. And as you saw, there was nothing in that adulthood quadrant of his chart. So yeah, it's pretty plain and
And
simple
and
to
it comes
see.
back to that fundamental question of what wealth means, whether it's to what it means to your client. You know, is it just talking about living a comfortable life where you don't have to worry about paying the bills or putting food on the table? You know, it's relative to the person of what they defined wealth as. You know, is MC Hammer, you know, lauding the days when he had $30 million versus $2 million now? You know, all these different factors. But I love this visual. This is my Mercury in Pisces. This is absolutely brilliant to color code and to have like a visual reference for all of these comprehensive factors in going through this medieval approach. I think this is just absolutely brilliant.
Yes, it's much clearer to see it in this way, isn't it? But yeah, wealth doesn't always mean happiness, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. But what does bring happiness is the Triplicity Lords. So, and that's happiness is part of the sustenance, right? So if you were in a really high paid role, but you hated the job, chances are you're not going to stay there. But and so that's the case of having amazing power and fixed stars, but terrible Triplicity Lords. But if you had, you know, middling or low fixed star activity and power, but strong Triplicity Lords, it's more the case of being able to, you know, sustain yourself and, you know, work in a job that's not super high profile or high income, but enough to live a comfortable and happy life. So we've got to weigh that up as to what people's priorities are. So that's it for the chart analysis there on good fortune. So I hope you've all been able to get something from that. This is one methodology that I've pulled out from Saul's book. It's not the be all and end all, but I just wanted to illustrate what the mind of a medieval astrologer would look to make an analysis. And there's all sorts of these little things scattered throughout the book as to what factors to consider. And as an astrologer, you'll eventually come to what is meaningful for you and what you've seen in your clients' charts that has a lot of resonance, that time and again says the same things. And those are these are essentially the toolkits. Like, this is our Andazaga's toolkit for good fortune. And hopefully that inspires you to create your little toolkit as well.
Thank you so much, Shu, for pulling this together. Again, it's absolutely fascinating. And even I'm going to have to go back on the recording and make my own notes. I'm sure there's many people pausing the video and going through their own charts. But the way you deliver this in such a clear and concise way, pulling all the pieces, is why you're one of my favorite astrologers in the world. So I'll put that there.
Oh, thanks, Callum. So I guess if you want to learn more about this style of astrology and yeah, the medieval period of astrology, I am about to jump into a medieval essentials course. Ehsan Kazemi, who has done some really brilliant webinars, I think they should be available on YouTube now or if not soon. I mean, we're teaming up with Ona Dosa and Anthony Lewis to deliver a medieval certificate. My course is, I guess, the gateway course. It will take the fundamental astrologer, so an astrologer that has the basics, it's been through a fundamental course, and extend you to this style of astrology. So looking at the different ways we can apply things like houses, modalities, signs, aspects, receptions, that kind of thing, because it was quite different. It's quite different to the way us modern astrologers are thinking and have been taught. And the other key development of this period was horary astrology. Like it was essentially invented during this time. And those practices of horary analysis can actually be applied to natal chart analysis too, and it will give you an edge in your natal chart analysis because of the fine tuning and the details and complexity that it can give. So that's the sort of things that I will be covering in this course, and Ehsan's going to be covering more of the unknown things like spherical astronomy, astrolabes, and how to make your own astrolabe and track planets in the sky and progress charts by using a tool, the lunar mansions and the lots, that kind of thing. So I can actually show you some core topics that I'll be studying. So we're going to be looking at dignity and debility. These are the types of things that we'll be looking at in greater detail to what you might have already seen in a fundamentals astrology course. And then also these planetary outcomes that are outlined in Sal's book. Like he has defined all of the movements of planets to 16 ways or 16 approaches that they can approach each other. This is in terms of aspects. And so we're going to be going through these 16 ways as one of the weeks to be able to really dive deep into planetary placements and aspects and who's talking to who's bringing what to who has left and who is coming, who's returning something that they don't want. All of that can be told within a natal chart, a horary chart, an electional chart, etc. So so I think our course starts September 28th in about a week's time. So hopefully you can join us.
Absolutely wonderful. And Shu, this is a 10-week course, this Medieval Essentials one.
My course, the one is 5 weeks and Ehsan's is 5 weeks. So they're running straight after each other, so you can run from one to the other. And then the way that we've scheduled the other courses, which is in the Significators course, Anthony Lewis is doing one of the electives, primary directions. Then next year I'll also be teaching Firdaria, annual perfections. They're kind of scattered in a way where you can run through and obtain the certificate. There's also electional astrology, medieval electional astrology that Ehsan will be teaching next year, which is a 7-point system. So if you like your methodologies like this, you want to get that course to be able to elect good times. And also a course that I'm really excited about is Ona Dosa's mundane astrology course. And, what a time in our life to be a mundane astrologer, right? So this is really putting to the test the foundations that were laid in 800, 1,000 years ago to see if they really do work, in our modern day context. And I want to also add that, Ehsan, Ona, and Anthony all are involved in their own translations of source text. This whole course is based on source material. And so we're seeing for the first time in this course, Ehsan bringing to the world Persian astrology. A lot of the texts that he works with are not even in the English language or in a modern language. He is translating them as he's creating the slides. So we have, you know, like access to a whole world that that has been laid hidden for over 1,000 years. So that's what's really exciting. Same with Ona and his Ottoman Empire astrology. He is the first person to be reviving that. And he's teaching that through his courses, little snippets of that. And he's now starting to bring them into English translations. So those books will be available, but you're also getting a glimpse and insight into a world that has been basically latent and buried for 1,000 years. So we feel very blessed that we're getting access through this course to what hopefully will be a new movement in astrology. So I mean, the way that I met Ehsan was because I came across one of his presentations, and he was referencing all of these astrologers that I'd never even heard of. And I emailed him. I said, "Who are these people? Like, I know Sal and I know Abu Mashari, all these common names that are available in English, thanks to our good friend Benjamin Dykes." But he said, "Yeah, there's a whole heap that the West don't know about," and he says Sol and Abu Mashar, they were great, but there were much greater astrologers there that we just haven't been able to revive into the modern language yet. So one of my big hopes with this certificate is that we gain some traction with the love of medieval astrology, of students who will one day would contribute to the translation projects and to help bring out the knowledge from the dead and into our modern world. And that is one sort of big wish that I have for this certificate. Hopefully I might see it in my lifetime, but maybe I'll have to look at my hemispheres.
Your talk is quite literally giving me goosebumps. Just what a time to be at Kepler College, and to go into these new certificates, whether it's the medieval certificates or the Hellenistic, and what a team you've pulled together. And it's a testament to you, Shu, and all the hard work you've been doing behind the scenes to pull all of this together. Because what a lineup. You've got yourself, you've got Azan, you've got Ona, you've got Anthony Lewis. I mean, just what a stellar lineup and a team for this new medieval certificate. And again, talking about Asan going and translating as he's going along, like this is new territory, and especially beneficial for us in the West to learn, what hasn't been out there for so long. So this is such an exciting time to be at Kepler College. And to reiterate for everybody watching, you'll see both in the description and the comment boxes the links both to the certificate information on our website and to the individual classes, like Shu's beginning September 28th. So you'll see those links below. I'll also link the video at the end of this video to Asan's conversation we had in his presentation on the part of fortune and spirit, even though those were the parts and the lots he primarily focused on. He also talked about the other lots, or the lesser known lots. So that's a very, very interesting episode if you want to check that out. So again, Shu, such exciting times to be at Kepler College. All astrology is teaching me is how little I know about anything. That's all I'm knowing. So I'm so thankful for you for coming on and sharing your insights and your wisdom. And thank you so much for going through this topic. And we very much look forward to the start of this medieval certificate.
Thank you. And thank you for your attention and your time, and also for hosting all of these wonderful videos, especially the webinars and the videos you've done with our tutors. Highly recommend. Anthony did a great one on primary directions. You don't want to miss that. Ona also on the significators. I mean, they're also good. And you've got to watch Ehsan's lots one. And he will be covering lots in his course also. It is just mind-blowing. So yes, definitely lots of material for you to get your teeth into.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait for our next episode down the line. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye, everyone.